Jackson Dart is on B-Flow's hit list once again, and the nerve of NFL rankings having him above our guy, Kyler Murray, and even J.J. McCarthy, for that matter. Let's talk about it.
Welcome into the Scene Project Sports Network tailgate show. This is our preview of the matchup between the New York Giants and our Minnesota Vikings. My name is Bubba Starts. We want to thank our sponsors, Odyssey Exteriors, for presenting the show today. And I got to bring in my guy, R.A.P.
Hey, what's going on? Appreciate you, man. I'm ready for this football season to kick off. Excited about this game, Vikings versus Giants, man.
Real football is back, and we're excited. We got some really big position battles, obviously, on the Vikings. The Giants have some storylines as well. So let's jump in and talk about it. We're not going to bury the lead here. It's going to be QB battle time. I would expect that we're going to see all three guys on the Vikings. What's your takes off the top talking about Minnesota Vikings position battles?
I think it's interesting what we have going on in camp leading up to this moment. I'll be curious to see who takes the lead here, and I think this is important. This is an important game for the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to tell us a story that we need the answers to, really. I'm looking forward to Kyler Murray. I'm looking forward to seeing if J.J. McCarthy also took a step forward. Not too much concerned about Carson Wentz or Max Brosmer. I think those guys kind of are where they're going to be as emergencies if needed throughout the season, which we hope we don't get there. But I think the main focus is Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy, who can go out there and impress not only the fans, but impress the coaches.
It's going to be most curious to me to see what the splits are in this first game, especially because Kyler needs to get work. If he's going to be QB1, he needs to get some time out there. Is KOC going to give him a quarter or even two? And then are you going to see JJ and Wentz get time in the second half? Or is it just going to be maybe split by half with your two kind of battling quarterbacks leading the charge in this? As we get, moving into the second and third games, I would expect you see more of your, guys lower on the roster. So this game's really a big one as far as who's going to get the play and how those reps are going to be split out there, because nobody to this point has earned their spot on the team.
No, I agree, but I do this is what I do expect. I do expect Kyler Murray to look similar to the Sam Darnold situation in 2024, where he played one drive and then he gets pulled out. And I think that's actually what should happen. Not that I know that that's going to happen. We have to wait and see. But I think Kyler Murray, from reports coming out, has been in the lead as far as being the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings in 2026. So if that is the case, they're probably going to try to lessen the risk of something happening. So I would say Kyler Murray goes out there for one drive, and then all of a sudden we see J.J. McCarthy. And that's great, actually, because that gives us fans an opportunity to see if there really is growth there. We will be able to notice the difference. And I know it's going up against second stringers and things like that. But if you pay attention to the mechanic things, I think it'll tell us a story. And then after this game, we'll be able to talk about it and say how we really feel about J.J. McCarthy's growth. Because we know the Vikings, they're locking down practice. We're not able to see a lot. We've been able to show some things the first couple practices, but after the Vikings caught wind of it, of fans recording, and we're getting this evidence, they said not anymore. So now we have to wait and see the football on the field.
Well, and exactly because of what we've seen is why I'm curious to actually see a little bit more of Kyler Murray out there. I don't think that you have to protect him. You have no long-term commitments to him. You're not paying him anything this year regardless, or next to nothing. I mean, $1 million is a lot to me and you, but on football terms, for a guy that has a $40 million contract, it's pennies. Yeah. So I would like to see them at least stick him out there for a quarter, and then maybe in the second and third games where hey, he's going to be the guy going out, like you said, Moore gets a series. And I don't even care if he plays in that last game, to be perfectly honest, once he's the guy. But I think moving up to this point that there really needs to be some evidence, and I think more so for the fans necessarily than for the coaching staff, because practice being locked down, we're not seeing it. What we are seeing, Kyler hasn't impressed to this point outside of maybe one day. And to all of the reporting that we're hearing coming out, has a lot left to prove yet to this fan base and to this coaching staff, regardless of how the head coach feels about who's getting that starting job.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. It's a great time to be a Minnesota Vikings fan. I know some people may look at it like, well, this is an unfortunate situation because they always say if you have two quarterbacks, that means you have none. And that's kind of what some of the OGs have been telling me behind the scenes when it comes to our quarterback situation. But as a fan, from my point of view, I actually think it's exciting. I think JJ McCarthy is actually going to be better just because he's always been about competition. If you know anything about his story, going to visit Ohio State and committing there, and they kind of, gave him the cold shoulder, and he intentionally wanted to go to their biggest rival to compete. And when he got in Michigan, he had to compete to then earn that job. And so he's a competitive guy. So I always said this at the beginning of this quote unquote competition that we have going on. I said one thing I know for sure about JJ McCarthy is he isn't going to lay down. You have a lot of guys that would, after you bring in somebody like Kyler Murray, they would kind of back down and just go through the motions. Now he's trying to make it interesting, man. So it's a good situation for us. I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, and what's really interesting is that on the other side of the field with the Giants, they have a young quarterback in Jackson Dart, who, as you alluded to in the open, ranked above both of the Minnesota quarterbacks by, GMs and people inside of the league. But this Minnesota Vikings defense last year held them to 33 passing yards in our season matchup. So it's interesting to me to come in here and on paper, you're telling me that Jackson Dart is a better quarterback than both of our guys, yet I've seen no evidence of that whatsoever.
Yeah, and I won't take too much away from Jackson Dart. I will say I'm on record saying how I'm a fan of Jackson Dart coming out of college. I actually had him as my number one quarterback in that draft class. But, he has a lot to learn, and the team didn't have success. And for me, if the quarterback is good, your team usually is going to have success. The Giants didn't have that. So I don't understand why he's ranked above, especially Kyler Murray. Now, JJ, I can possibly make the argument, and that's just due to the lack of games that JJ McCarthy was able to play, only being able to play 10 games last season. But Kyler Murray, if you look at the track record, and, I don't want to keep going to the past and let bygones be bygones. But at the end of the day, Kyler Murray has shown that he could play at a high level if he's in the right situation. So Jackson Dart hasn't showed he can do that yet. So it's just crazy how they have him ranked that high above Kyler Murray.
Exactly why us here at the Scene Project Sports Network and at the Vocal Vike YouTube channel, where you can find RAP daily putting out fantastic Vikings content. We don't pay too much attention to these. Obviously, we have to report on them, but I'm not putting a lot of stock in all of these rankings and things, and especially if they're coming from the press and not from, players and coaches themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Grain of salt. That's what they say. Take it with a grain of salt. For sure.
Well, and on the other side of the field, sticking with some of the Giants headlines, they got a new coach, a guy that had a lot of success in his tenure. I think a lot of people were surprised to see him not coming back in purple himself this year, although in a Ravens jersey. John Harbaugh is the new coach of the New York Football Giants. What do you think the coach is going to bring to a team that, by all intents, struggled mightily last year?
I will say it's definitely an upgrade. I think he will change the culture there, honestly, because Harbaugh is a guy that's he makes an impact on players. That's obvious. He's had a ton of success in Baltimore. So I think it is going to benefit the New York Giants fans, and it'll benefit their team. And this goes to guys like Jackson Dart. Like, one thing I like about Harbaugh is when Lamar Jackson got drafted, and they went from Joe Flacco. They went from Flacco to Lamar, and Harbaugh didn't hesitate to mold his offense around his young quarterback. I expect him to do a lot of the same when it comes to Jackson Dart. So, there's some positives there to take. But the biggest kryptonite is going to be Brian Flores. And when you talk about Brian Flores' defense matching up against young quarterbacks, he makes it a nightmare for them. But all in all, I think Harbaugh was definitely an upgrade from what they had last year. I don't think it's a big enough upgrade to beat the Minnesota Vikings.
No, and obviously in a preseason matchup, we're not putting a lot of stock into the win and loss at the end of this.
Yeah.
So speaking of that B-Flow defense, not a guy typically that puts a lot of faith into younger players, at least in his tenure here with the Minnesota Vikings. It hasn't gone that way. But this year's draft had Brian Flores' thumbprint all over it. And you are seeing in training camp for the Vikings that these young guys are getting a lot of runway out there. I think there's a couple of guys up on that defensive line that are going to show out in their first chance to really get some game action. It's very hard for a defensive lineman to show what they have in training camp practices.
Yeah, no, we've been hearing a lot of great things about the young players that we drafted. So I'm super excited. Shout out to the Vikings front office this year, especially when you think about everything that went down, and it went down fairly quickly right before the draft was happening. So, there was a lot of moving around the pieces of the puzzle there and having to figure out how to still execute at a high level when you're bringing in new faces. And you had Rob step up and kind of take the lead there with the help of Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. But to your point, yes, this draft absolutely had Brian Flores' name written all over it. And we're already hearing success stories from a lot of these young players and coming from somebody like Brian Flores, who doesn't, like you said, he doesn't like to rely on younger players to step in and be pivotal pieces of the defense. But this year, it's seeming like we're going to have not only one, but maybe multiple. You get up to 3 or 4 guys that are going to be day one starters making impacts out there right away. So I'm excited about that. And we get a chance to see that in this preseason game coming up.
Yeah, finally, a guy making big splashes and headlines all over training camp practice. Charles Demings is all over there. Chucky D has just been making some splashes. But a guy like Caleb Banks, who I don't want to call it a controversial pick, although I think a lot of Vikings fans were surprised because of his foot injury at the combine. A lot of people had taken him out of the first round completely. But I think what you're seeing at training camp is that the Vikings got a steal at 18 with a guy that a lot of teams had as a top 10 overall pick before the foot injury at the combine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he was easily a top 10 pick according to the consensus to all the top draft guys. But, pre-foot injury, everybody had Caleb Banks top 10. I even seen a couple that had him even as a top 5 pick. So, and then the foot injury happens, and then all of a sudden the player isn't going to be generational, because people were scouting him as a generational talent just based off his size and his speed. Because usually guys his size don't move like that. Like, they don't move like that. So I had the pleasure to have a good friend named Skull Doc, who is actually a ankle and foot doctor. And I had a chance to sit down with him on my show on Vocal Vike. And he told us, relax. He broke down the exact injury that happened, the exact process to how to heal that injury, and also answered questions if the injury would reoccur, if it's something Vikings fans should be concerned about the moment if we see Caleb Banks go down or start holding the foot. Is it something that's going to continue to just be a damper on the process? And he told us absolutely not. The surgery, once it's done, it actually is better than your actual bone that goes there when they put that screw in there. I mean, he said it's actually even in a lot of cases better than the bone. So now, that really took a weight off my shoulders and said, you know what, I think we really struck gold on this pick. And not only that, after the couple practices, man, that's all you're hearing. Oh, Caleb Banks is explosive off the line, sack here, sack there, would have been sack here, pressure here. I mean, this dude is just doing what he's supposed to do. So it's possible that we might have got us a generational defensive tackle with the first round pick this year.
Yeah, and to pick him up at 18 it is an absolute steal because of the way the contracts are structured. You still get him in the first, so you can put that 5th-year option on his rookie contract as well. So massive. And I know it surprised a lot, and no video exemplified that more than the Vikings' own video from inside a US Bank Stadium when the pick was announced. But I had watched your episode with Skoldoc, and that was eye-opening to me to put all of my fears to rest. And I think it should for the rest of Vikings Nation. And now you're seeing it play out in training camp. You're not even seeing him operate at 100 or, at top speed right now at practice, right? You are seeing maybe 80% of that. And I think that once they get in this game, he's going to be hungry to really show what he can do. And that's not to take away from anything his brother in the trenches, Big Citrus, Dominic Orange, who I think has been impressing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't been hearing as much about Big Citrus as we have been hearing about Caleb Banks, but you see the name splashing here and there. I think it's easily Caleb Banks and Chuck D are the two younger players that are really making their mark at training camp thus far. Somebody who I was kind of excited about going into training camp was Jacoby Thomas, the safety we got out of Miami. I was thinking the way we're talking about Chuck D and what we're hearing about Chuck D, I was thinking that he was going to be that player. And it wasn't going to be surprising to me to hear those type of things about him. But he's been kind of under the radar. Jake Golday had a couple good days too. So, and that's somebody who I think Brian Flores is really intrigued about and can't wait to see how he utilizes him. I mean, he said right when he walked in the building, Brian Flores straight up told him, hey, I want you to learn multiple positions because you're going to be moved around. So that kind of answers our question. Is he going to be a pass rusher? Is he going to be a linebacker? Well, guess what? He's going to do all of it. So I'm excited to see that too. He wound up getting himself an interception at practice, or tip. He forced an interception with a tip. So shout out to Jake Golday, man. But yes, this young draft class we got in 2026, man, I cannot wait to watch them match up against the New York Giants. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Well, and really in one draft class, you're able to build an entire new backbone of this franchise on the defensive side. And I don't have any questions about Jacoby Thomas and his impact that he's going to have. I think it's hard for guys that play his style to make an impact at practice because he's a hard-hitting, strong safety, right? His job is to really stuff the run. He's not the free safety kind of lurking. I think also training camp is an opportunity for cornerbacks, especially like a Demings, who's just getting his hands on everything and locking guys down. It's much easier to see that in the practices because of how the practices are structured, right? And what you're being asked to do, defenses that are being called in that maybe a little bit more vanilla than what Brian Flores is going to show when you're playing an opponent. And I honestly feel a little bit bad for the Giants being the first victims on the list, even in preseason action, because these rookies are going to get play out there. There's only so many guys on the roster, especially on that defensive side, that are going to get trotted out there. So you're going to see a lot of Demings and Thomas and Golday and Big Citrus and Caleb Banks out there and really watching the future of the Minnesota Vikings defense blossom right before our eyes. And we're going to see it right away in this first matchup.
Absolutely. I agree 110%. This is an exciting time, man. Football is officially back, baby.
Well, and flipping sides of the field on the offensive side now, and not a lot of offensive rookies. I know we have a couple of offensive linemen that are going to get to see out there. Tiernan being, on the top of that list there, but also a guy that we were hoping to see a bit more of. I know he had a slight injury, but your guy, Demond Claiborne, we want to see that speed in action, hoping that whatever slight injury he had is behind him, and he's going to get a lot of carries and a lot of chances to go out there and show what he can do on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Demond Claiborne, after having to sit out for a practice, and which was a little concerning. I had a couple guys at practice, and they let me know right away, hey, your boy isn't out there. So it was concerning, and news didn't come out right away either. It took like 2 days before they even mentioned that what was going on. I'm like, is it something like a hamstring? Is it family matter? Whatever the case may be. But then he wound up showing back up at practice. And the first day he got back, he kind of just was working by himself in the rehabilitation area where they're kind of just taking it light. And then the following day, he was able to come out and actually practice with the full team and do a full practice. And he was flashing. hearing the information, oh, Demond Claiborne, it's real. His speed is real. The player is real. And that got me excited. I know there are some beat writers that have been at practice that have not been so high on Demond Claiborne. Some of the bigger Vikings channels also have been talking about how they don't even believe he's going to make the 53-man roster. And I have to disagree respectfully, because with his skill set, and you see him at that practice when he came back, the way he flashes and how fast he is, just that ability, I'm sure they're going to find a reason. They don't even have to look for a reason. They're going to find a way to make sure he's part of that 53-man.
Yeah, and the only thing that he has to really work on is his hands and ball security. If he straightens those out, this may be a guy that is a multiple-year starter for this team if he can learn how to do the other things. We know he has the breakaway speed. We know that KOC is going to find a way to accentuate that. Young man just has to hold on to the ball and, rip off those 60 to 80-yard runs that this team just has not seen in, I would say, a few years at least.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. Dalvin Cook-esque type player. Jahmyr Gibbs is really who I compared him to. So if you're a fan of Jahmyr Gibbs, not the Lions, but Jahmyr Gibbs as a player, you should get excited about Demond Claiborne because the similarities are there.
All right, Rap, let's get your game prediction real quick. Now, we're not putting a lot of weight on these early in the season because it is still preseason, but who do you have winning this game?
I have the Minnesota Vikings winning this game 24-14. I expect the offense to be explosive. A lot of it goes to what we talked about. Like, people got to understand that we have two starting caliber quarterbacks that are going to be playing. This isn't like your average, you got your starter that plays a drive, and then all of a sudden you got the talent level just drops off from there. We have two guys, if not three guys, that actually have the potential to be a starting quarterback in this league. So I think the offense is going to, it's going to run against twos and threes, man. I think we're going to be putting up some points here. And then I also just look at the defense. Reason why I give them only 14 points is like we talked about as well. A lot of these rookies that we drafted in 2026 on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to make it tough on that backup quarterback for the New York Giants. I just don't see it being that much of a competition. I'll give us a double-digit lead.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for them to score 2 touchdowns, to be perfectly honest. Raph, I think the Vikings win this one handily. I think the league starts to talk more about the Vikings defense than the quarterback battle on the national media side after this one, and that there's going to be some fear stricken into our NFC North opponents and everyone else that's on the schedule for the Minnesota Vikings. Appreciate you getting on, Rap. We're going to do this every week, previewing every game of the season. Make sure you're checking out Rap at Vocal Vike on YouTube. He's got some really great content there always. You already know to follow us here at Scene Project Sports Network on YouTube and all your social media. We have a new SPSN tailgate counts going up, so make sure you follow those on Instagram and over on TikTok to see the clips there. And always join us here for live streams and more on the Scene Project Sports Network. We'll see you next week.
Skol Vikes.